Hey friends, I'm really excited to share with you all of my reading plans that I have cooking up this February. When I think February, the first thing that comes to my mind is Valentine's. As much as I love all things dark and macabre, I am a sucker for Valentine's Day, the aesthetics, the color palette, everything. But luckily, Halloween lovers have created an amalgam of both Valentine's and Halloween called Valloween. So us Halloween lovers can have the best of both worlds. So that is really guiding my selection of books that I'm getting to this February. Think Gothic Romance, think vampires, and also the dark side of Happily Ever After. One vampire book I'm really excited to get to this month is going to be Carmilla. For some reason, I've been in a huge classics mood. I don't know why, it's just something that I'm feeling really compelled and drawn to at this point, and Carmilla is definitely one of them. Tell me why I thought the author was actually a woman for the longest time until I started researching a little bit more of the background of this book and realized like, oh shit, it's like a man, which kind of turned me off a little bit, knowing a little bit of like the sapphic elements of this story. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm hoping. I feel like I've heard a mixed bag in terms of the reviews on this book from people I follow on BookTube, so we'll see. Then we have here Reluctant Immortals by Gwendolyn Kist, which has the most amazing cover. It's giving this really cool psychedelic vibe. I know it's historical horror, and I know that it's kind of like this way of reclaiming a lot of the ways that men have written fictional women in the past. I recently read Dracula this past summer, so I do have a bit of context to understand one of those characters in this book's like storyline. And I read Jane Eyre when I was in high school a million years ago, which I do need to do an adult reread of that one. It's like in the back of my brain somewhere, so I'm sure the author will share with us anything that we might need to know for that story. Those two vampire books are pretty popular, pretty well known, but my third vampire book I want to get to this February, I feel like is not being talked about, and it is relatively new. Actually, it's not relatively new, it's very new. It came out in May of 2023, and that book is A Long Time Dead. The only other things I know about this story, besides its queer rep and also that it includes vampires, is that it is a little bit historic in nature, so I think some of the time periods are set within the 1800s, and that there's also a found family trope here with like a group of women, I think just like grappling with immortality, and I think there's also possibly some drama a brewing as well. Let's move on to some Gothic romance vibes. In addition to classics, I've also really been getting into Gothic romance and just like the Gothic genre in general. And I think it has a lot to do with Elizabeth Sagewood and just, you know, making this genre so appealing with her Haunted Victorian Book Club, which you should definitely join. And her February book club pick is going to be Bluebeard's Castle. This book has been really hyped up for me because the same person who wrote and directed the Love Witch movie also wrote this book, which I haven't seen The Love Witch. It's on my February list of movies to watch, don't you worry. But I just feel like they have such a, you know, unique direction in terms of like how they create art just based off of what I've seen of their work from like, you know, a distance, that I feel like there will be a distinctive perspective and aesthetic that she approaches in this book. And also Bluebeard, I think, has to be one of my favorite folklore, folk tales, fairy tales, whatever you want to call it, that I grew up with, and it just always stuck with me. There's just something about women in captivity in these castles, that like isolation factor where they're basically at the whim of men, of patriarchy, and the violence that is enacted on them. Like in one short story, all of that really is fleshed out and shown and illustrated. Elizabeth is also participating in the Gothic Hearts challenge for February, which is like all month. So it'll work for one of those prompts. This book will also work for a prompt for Folklore February, which is hosted by Kat from Kat's Novel Adventures. So it's really hitting like three things at one time, which is awesome. I also have The Voice Upstairs by Laura E. Weymouth on my list as well for February. This one also came out last year in October. It's set in the 1920s, and this one is another book cover pick for me. Like I just am such a sucker for a good book cover. What I know about this one is that the person who's depicted on this amazing cover can actually see ghosts. And so there's also this mystery element because she goes to help out this lord, because she's this working class gal. So she uses her, you know, abilities to help out this lord, this wealthy dude, resolve some issue that he's dealing with. So obviously, romance is percolating, and I have no clue besides that what's going on with this one. But I just hope that the romance isn't something that's like cheesy, because sometimes, well, I guess the majority of the time, romance typically doesn't really work for me. It has to really be done in a very specific way way. It's not like I'm picky. I just know that the romance genre isn't really my jam. And then I also have Phantom Manor by Marilyn Ross. This is actually a 1960s vintage Gothic romance novel. There's this woman who is just dealing with the loss of her father. Her mother passed away when she was really, really young. So then she goes to England because I think she was born in like the United States or something. And she goes back to that family, and that family's estate. And I think it's haunted, and you know, she just really has nowhere else to go. So I think the question here is like, is this house really haunted? Is it just, you know, the town stories? I'm hoping there's actually some supernatural elements at play. I really enjoyed participating in Folklore February last month, and so these books here are going to be hitting some of those prompts. I really want to read Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron. If this is the same author that wrote You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, then I am really concerned because I really disliked that book. I just thought that the writing of these teenage kids and like their dialogue was just super cringy, and I didn't like the blending of subgenres and tropes in that one. Gosh, okay, now I'm a little concerned, but I'll keep you updated on how this one goes. I just really like this idea of retelling Cinderella from a very different perspective. It's young adult, which I generally really like, and I seek those out. There's also queer representation in this too, which is awesome. And apparently it takes place in the same universe, the same world as Cinderella, many, I think maybe centuries after. So that's really cool. That's a very promising premise that I hope this author's writing style just really works with me on this one. I have heard so many great things about Patricia Wants to Cuddle. I'm imagining it to be really weird and strange and funny and quirky. So if it gives me that, I'm here for this. Like the cover already does. So I'm hoping the contents really brings it. And then I have a short story collection, which is Our Shadows Have Claws. This one takes stories, legends, folk tales from Latin American countries and gives them a little bit more of like a spin, something a little bit more modern, more on the horror side. So when I'm feeling like I'm in a short story mood, I can just kind of like open up this one. And then my one nonfiction book for February is going to be Disfigured on fairy tales, disability, and making space. Just based off of the summary, I think this will be really great as a way to hone my critical lens when I'm approaching any kind of stories, but specifically fairy tales that include any kind of representation regarding disability. I literally just finished reading The Phantom of the Opera and also watching the silent film version of it. So this idea of like disabled people in literature is already at the forefront of my mind. I think it's been a minute since I've been this excited about a TBR. Let me know what you plan on reading this February. Maybe you have something with some like romance vibes as well mixed in. I'd love to know, and I will see you on my next video. Bye!